The morning sky over Southampton was a muted gray, reflecting the uncertain mood of the impending weekend. A polished silver limousine glided up the winding drive of the Sterling estate, a place that didn't merely suggest affluence, but proclaimed it with every sculpted hedge and shimmering glass panel. Inside sat Eleanor Vance, the visionary founder and CEO of Quantum Leap. At 43, a native of Detroit, raised by her grandmother after her parents passed away in a tragic accident when she was 12, she had forged an empire from raw innovation, relentless effort, and countless sleepless nights. Now, she was on the verge of finalizing a deal that could fundamentally alter the course of digital security itself. Eleanor adjusted the lapel of her charcoal gray suit. Nothing ostentatious. She shunned attention for its own sake, preferring tangible results. "Madam," her driver announced, stepping out to open her door, "we've arrived." She offered a brief nod, more to herself than to him, and stepped out. The mansion loomed, immense yet impersonal, all stark white stone and expansive glass, designed more for the glossy pages of a magazine than for actual inhabitants. The grand front doors swung open just as she approached. Eleanor, a tall, impeccably dressed man with distinguished silver hair and a meticulously practiced smile, greeted her with open arms. "Arthur Sterling." "A genuine pleasure," Eleanor responded, extending her hand. "Good to finally meet you in person, Mr. Sterling." "Please call me Arthur," he replied. "We're practically partners now." She offered a polite smile, acutely aware that in his eyes, they were far from equals. The Sterling family's immense wealth was rooted in generations of old money, textiles, and global finance. Now, in a bid for continued relevance, they sought to absorb the cutting-edge innovation they couldn't otherwise command. Behind Arthur stood his wife, Vivian, in an ivory silk suit that likely cost more than Eleanor's entire professional wardrobe. Her expression, too, was meticulously crafted, friendly yet reserved, as if still evaluating Eleanor's right to be there. "Welcome to our home," Vivian said. "I trust your flight was comfortable." "It was. Thank you for your hospitality," Eleanor replied. They ushered her inside. The air was redolent with the scent of lemon polish and inherited wealth. A young staff member, a woman in a crisp black uniform, took Eleanor's modest leather briefcase and disappeared down a corridor. Arthur began to pontificate on various pieces of art and architectural details as they walked, but Eleanor's thoughts were elsewhere. She was here to close the deal. $750 million in equity, expanded global reach, and substantially increased R&D funding. It was a package most CEOs would readily sacrifice for. But Eleanor wasn't most CEOs. Her journey began with nights of instant noodles and watching her grandmother meticulously mend garments, late into the night to make ends meet. The Sterlings had invited her for a full weekend, a formal dinner tonight, brunch with key shareholders the following day, and a closing ceremony on Sunday, complete with a dedicated PR team. Everything meticulously orchestrated. Yet, just a few steps inside this opulent house, Eleanor felt a chill pierce through her. Not fear, not intimidation, but a stark realization. She was the only black woman in the room, likely the only one for the entire weekend. "Let me show you to your room," Vivian said, gesturing towards the grand staircase. "We've placed you on the second floor, the east wing." Eleanor paused. "I thought the other guests were staying in the west wing?" Vivian's smile remained fixed. "Yes, but we thought you might prefer more privacy." Eleanor's gaze lingered on Vivian's for a moment, longer than strictly polite, but she said nothing, merely nodding as she ascended the stairs, her phone vibrated in her hand. A message from her CFO back in Silicon Valley. Any red flags? Eleanor stared at the question for a moment before typing her response. Too early to tell, but the atmosphere is already thick. Something told her it wasn't. Just the weather that was about to shift. Eleanor stood by the floor-to-ceiling window in her guest suite. Outside, the ocean stretched into a hazy, muted gray. Inside, everything was shades of beige and glass. The room exuded expense, yet felt utterly devoid of life, as if no one had ever truly laughed or cried within its walls. She placed her suitcase on the bed and sat, allowing the silence to settle around her. No personal photographs, no books, just silence and meticulously chosen furniture. She had been in rooms like this before. Corporate apartments, exclusive lounges, donor retreats, spaces where one was invited, but only on their terms. A soft knock broke the stillness. It was Robert, the family's personal assistant, young, Caucasian, overdressed in a navy suit that seemed a size too large. "Miss Vance," he stammered, avoiding her direct gaze. "Dinner will be at 7 sharp, formal attire. The family wishes to introduce you to a few board members and close friends. Before the full announcement on Sunday." Eleanor nodded. "Thank you." He hesitated. "There's a stylist downstairs if you'd like any touch-ups or suggestions." That last word hung in the air like a heavy mist. Suggestions. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "I believe I'll be perfectly fine, Robert." He flushed crimson and quickly retreated. Eleanor didn't need a stylist. She wore a deep navy sheath dress, its lines sleek and strong, devoid of any unnecessary embellishments. Her natural curls were gathered into a soft low bun. Her gold earrings were small, understated. Every detail was intentional. She always dressed as if she knew precisely where she was headed, because she did. Still, she rose and checked her reflection in the mirror, adjusting her posture, her watch. Not for them, but for herself. Downstairs, the estate had transformed. From sterile quiet to a subtle hum beneath the surface. The faint clink of champagne glasses, hushed greetings, the rustle of expensive fabrics. Eleanor stepped into the hallway just as another guest emerged from a room, a tall, older man, in a tuxedo and designer sneakers. He surveyed her, not unpleasantly, then gave a brief nod. "Evening," he murmured, his accent thick with old Boston money. "Evening," Eleanor replied, and they descended the stairs together in comfortable silence. The dining room was immense, with towering ceilings, flickering candlelight, and an almost surreal view of the sea. A long mahogany table dominated the center, set for at least 20 guests. At the head, Arthur Sterling was already sipping scotch. Vivian stood by the fireplace, laughing softly with an older white couple adorned in pearls and navy blazers. Eleanor scanned the room. There were no place cards. Arthur spotted her and rose. "Ah, our esteemed guest," he exclaimed, arms outstretched once more. "Everyone, this is the brilliant Miss Eleanor Vance, founder, innovator, the future of technology." The room offered polite applause, a few smiles, some stiff nods. Vivian appeared at her side. "Come, dear, let's find you a seat." But instead of guiding her towards the head of the table, where decisions were made and narratives shaped, Vivian led her towards the middle. Not the worst seat, but certainly far from where it mattered. Eleanor sat, her eyes flicking towards the head of the table. She immediately discerned the seating arrangement. Men in suits, their wives in pearls, board members, and family scions. The Sterling sons were already engrossed in conversation and laughter with guests. A waiter poured her wine without a word. She didn't touch it. Across the table, a man in his late 30s, tanned with slick back hair, leaned in. "So," he said with a grin, "You're the genius Arthur flew in?" Eleanor met his gaze. Genius is a stretch. "But yes, I'm the CEO of Quantum Leap. Quantum Leap, right? That's the thing with like AI and machine thinking or whatever, right?" Her expression remained unchanged. "Yes, we build advanced decision systems for autonomous data processing across defense, healthcare, and finance." He blinked. "Oh," the woman beside him chuckled. "We just assumed you worked in media. You have such presence." Eleanor let the comment hang in the air, then offered a cool, tight smile. "I'm sure you meant that as a compliment." "Of course," the woman replied, sipping her wine without looking back at Eleanor, but Eleanor could already feel it. This wasn't about business. This was about firmly reminding her of where they believed she belonged. Plates clinked, glasses tapped. The low murmur of laughter drifted from the head of the table, where Arthur held court, exchanging anecdotes about textile deals and private jets with men who believed they orchestrated the world. Because, for the most part, they did. Eleanor sat among strangers who repeatedly mistook her for a novelty. "So, Eleanor," an older woman across the table inquired. Her eyes narrowed as if trying to decipher something written on Eleanor's face. "Where did you go to school again?" "Stanford," Eleanor replied. "Oh, how lovely," the woman said, sounding genuinely surprised. "Good for you." Eleanor gave a small, polite nod. "Thank you." Next to her, a man with a square jaw and a loosened tie leaned in. "You know," he began, "I told Arthur I liked this move, getting some color into the portfolio. It's modern, sharp." Eleanor looked at him directly. "We're not paint samples, and Quantum Leap isn't a diversity hire." He chuckled, not hearing her, or perhaps not caring. No, I meant it's bold, right? Very next gen." The woman beside him offered a nervous laugh and whispered something to the man, who merely shrugged and sipped his wine. Eleanor picked up her water glass, her hand steady, her mind acutely alert. She had encountered this before. Perhaps not this estate, not this family, but this table. These smiles, these comments veiled in compliments like barbed wire coated in sugar. Across the room, she spotted Liam Sterling, Arthur's middle son, conversing with two hedge fund managers near the bar. His hair was slicked back, his shirt unbuttoned just enough to suggest he defied conventions, the type of man who wore loafers without socks and still secured the deal. He saw her and winked. She turned away. Vivian tapped her glass twice with a dessert fork. "Everyone," she announced, standing with that practiced politician's smile, "we just want to thank you all for joining us tonight. This weekend is a celebration, a merging of minds and missions. Quantum Leap, under Miss Vance's extraordinary leadership, has transformed our understanding of technology." A smattering of polite applause, a few nods. Someone cleared their throat. Vivian continued, "It's rare to find innovation with such heart. Eleanor's journey is one of determination, intelligence, and most of all, courage." Eleanor subtly clenched her jaw. Courage. The word hung in the air as if she had just recovered from a trauma, rather than having built a multi-billion-dollar company. Vivian raised her glass. "To bold futures." Everyone echoed the sentiment. "To bold futures." Eleanor raised hers silently as well. A few minutes later, Liam meandered over to her section of the table, laughing excessively at his own joke. He slid into the chair beside her, uninvited. "Eleanor, right?" he said, pouring himself more wine. "I've heard all about you. Big brain, big company, big leap." "That's me," she said, her eyes fixed on her plate. He leaned in. "Between us, Dad thinks you're impressive, but there's still some concern about the temperament thing." Eleanor turned her head. "Temperament?" Yeah, founders like you're passionate, driven, but passion can turn into, what's the word? Volatility. He grinned as if they were sharing a secret. And let's be honest, a $750 million handshake needs more steadiness. Eleanor stared at him. Then she spoke. Tell me something, Liam. If I were a 45-year-old white man in Patagonia fleece and Allbirds, would you still be worried about my temperament? He blinked, then laughed awkwardly. Come on, don't do that. I'm just asking. You don't have to be so sensitive. I'm just saying what the board's probably thinking. She stood. No announcement, no dramatic exit. She simply rose. Excuse me, she said, her voice as calm as stone. She walked away from the table, ignoring the murmurs and raised eyebrows. Her heels clicked against the stone floor until she vanished into the hallway. But the thing about silence is, it doesn't signify defeat. Sometimes it means a decision has been made not to entertain foolishness. The guest bathroom off the corridor was spotless. Chrome fixtures, a lengthy mirror, the kind of space designed more for display than for practical use. Eleanor locked the door behind her and exhaled. Not a sigh, but simply air leaving her lungs, as if they refused to bear the weight of another. Forced smile. She didn't cry, not because she didn't want to, but because she couldn't afford to. She gazed at her reflection, strong jaw, steady eyes, hair pulled back like armor. People often mistook composure for coldness, but they failed to grasp the immense cost of maintaining one's equilibrium in rooms designed to diminish you. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was her CFO, Sarah Chun, checking in. How's it going? Eleanor hesitated, then typed, I'm reconsidering everything. The typing dots appeared. Talk to me. Eleanor stared at the screen. It's not just a bad dinner, Sarah. It's who we'd be tied to. Their name would sit next to ours on every letterhead, every press release. I'm not sure I can stomach it. A moment of silence. Then, you always said we don't beg for tables, we build our own. Eleanor's fingers paused. That sentence struck her harder than any of the microaggressions she had endured that night. She had built Quantum Leap from a laptop in a public library, not with capital, but with code, caffeine, and a vision so tenacious it refused to die. And now here she was, being told her leadership was emotional, that she should be grateful. That her place at the table came with unspoken conditions. A soft knock at the door. Eleanor. It was Vivian. Eleanor opened it. Vivian tilted her head. Everything all right? Eleanor offered a faint smile. Just needed a moment. Vivian lowered her voice. Listen, I know Liam can be blunt, but don't take it personally. He's just entitled, Eleanor said, folding her arms. Vivian blinked. Well, privileged, yes. Eleanor looked her squarely in the eye. Vivian, let me ask you something. If your son ran a company like mine, would he be asked about temperament? Would you sit him away from decision makers? Would your guests assume he was hired to check a box? Vivian hesitated. You're interpreting things in a very specific way. No, Eleanor said. I'm interpreting them exactly as they were given. Silence. Vivian's mouth tightened. This deal is a tremendous opportunity for both sides. Eleanor nodded. That's what I'm starting to question. Vivian offered a polite smile. Well, I hope you'll reconsider. Whatever it is you're feeling right now. Eleanor held her gaze. I'm not feeling anything, Vivian. I'm thinking. She walked past Vivian and back down the hallway towards her room. Inside, she opened her laptop. Her inbox was overflowing. Investors, board members, journalists, all awaiting the announcement on Monday morning. She opened a blank document and typed a single sentence. After careful consideration, Quantum Leap will no longer pursue partnership with the Sterling Group. She stared at it, then added, "We believe integrity cannot be negotiated." She hit save, not send. Not yet, she would sleep on it. But her gut had already decided, and when Eleanor Vance trusted her gut, it rarely steered her wrong. Sunday morning still lay ahead, and what she said next would resonate louder than anything they could ever say about her. Sunlight streamed into the room the next morning, illuminating the walls like a spotlight. Eleanor was already dressed. Black slacks, a cream blouse, her hair pulled into a neat, low twist. No jewelry, no distractions, just clarity. She sat at the edge of the bed, laptop open on her lap, staring at the draft she had written the previous night. Her finger hovered over the trackpad, but she didn't click anything yet. A soft knock. "Come in," she said that it was Sarah, her CFO. She had caught a red-eye flight from California after reading Eleanor's message. "You flew in?" Eleanor asked. Sarah nodded. "You didn't sound like you needed strategy. You sounded like you needed backup." Eleanor smiled. "Thanks." They sat for a moment in silence. "You really want to walk away from this?" Sarah finally asked. Eleanor didn't answer immediately. She closed the laptop. "I think I already did." Sarah leaned back in the armchair near the window. "You know what Wall Street will say: overreaction, unprofessional. They'll spin it like you were difficult." Eleanor nodded. "Let them." Sarah studied her. "I'm with you no matter what, but you don't have to do this to prove anything." Eleanor stood and walked to the window. "I'm not proving anything," she said quietly. "I'm protecting everything." Quantum Leap was never about just the money. It was about what's possible, what's next, and these people, they don't see us. They see something shiny to control. Sarah exhaled. "So what's the plan?" Eleanor turned around, calm, certain. "We hold the press briefing today. No drama, no shots fired, just truth, clear, professional, public. Board's going to ask 1,000 questions. I'll give them 1,000 answers," Eleanor said. "But they already know who I am, and they know I don't bluff." Sarah grinned. "You sure you don't want to at least tell Liam where to stick his dad's money?" Eleanor smiled. "Tempting, but no, dignity first." There was a beat. Then Sarah asked, "What are you going to wear?" Eleanor laughed. "You think I'm doing this in a hoodie?" 2 hours later, Eleanor walked into the main salon of the Sterling estate, where Arthur, Vivian, and their legal team were assembled. The mood was rigid, polished, as if a storm had already passed, and everyone was simply waiting to see where the debris would fall. "Eleanor," Arthur said, standing, his hands clasped in front of him like a man accustomed to being thanked. "We need to talk," she said. They sat. "I appreciate your hospitality," Eleanor began, "but I've decided to withdraw from the merger." Vivian's smile faltered. Arthur blinked as if he hadn't heard her correctly. "I'm sorry. I'm withdrawing. Effective immediately." Arthur's voice remained calm, but his face reddened. "Eleanor, we have a deal on the table. Final stage. Do you realize the amount of capital you're walking away from?" "I do," she said. "And I realize the kind of company we'd become if I took it." Vivian interjected. "If this is about Liam's comments." "It's not just about Liam," Eleanor said, cutting her off gently but firmly. "It's about tone, positioning, the way you treat leadership you don't recognize as familiar." Arthur tried again. "If we offended you," Eleanor raised a hand. "You didn't offend me. You confirmed for me that this was never a partnership. It was an acquisition dressed up like progress." Silence. She stood. "You can keep your check. Quantum Leap will be just fine." But her words wouldn't remain confined to that room. In a few minutes, the world would hear them. Eleanor stood in front of a plain white backdrop at the Southampton Community Center. Not the Sterling Estate, not some grand ballroom, just a modest hall with a podium and rows of folding chairs. Now packed with reporters, photographers, and a few early arrivals who had heard whispers that something significant was unfolding. Sarah stood off to the side, checking her phone, managing the press. No one knew precisely what Eleanor was going to say, but the media had smelled smoke and arrived to find the fire. Eleanor adjusted the microphone. No teleprompter, no script, just a stack of note cards in her hand, barely glanced at. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice steady and clear. "I'll keep this short because clarity doesn't require much time." She looked directly into the cameras. "After deep thought and careful consideration, I've chosen to withdraw Quantum Leap from the pending merger with the Sterling Group." Gasps. A few pens scratched faster. Camera flashes began popping like nervous heartbeats. "This decision is final," she continued. "And it's not based on money or legal technicalities. It's about something far more important. Values." She paused. No one moved. Quantum Leap was founded with one goal: to build technology that advances human potential. But it was also built on something harder to measure: dignity, accountability, vision. "I've always believed the culture of a company matters just as much as its code." She flipped the card. "Over the past 48 hours, I've learned enough to know that a partnership with the Sterling Group would compromise the DNA of what we've built. Not because they're not successful, but because their success was never built with people like me in mind." Silence. "They invited me to their table, but it was clear from the moment I walked in. I wasn't expected to lead, just decorate." "Ah." Murmur rippled through the room. Eleanor continued, unshaken. "This isn't personal. This is about principle. Quantum Leap will grow with partners who see us, not just our numbers. And I say this to every founder, every leader, every woman, every person who's ever been told to shrink in rooms they earned their way into. You don't need to accept disrespect for the sake of opportunity." Someone in the crowd whispered, "Wow." She finished without flourish, her voice steady, even. "We're not in the business of selling out. We're in the business of building up." Pause, then applause. It began quietly, but quickly swelled. Reporters shouted questions. Microphones thrust forward. "Eleanor, what did the Sterlings say? Will Quantum Leap be seeking another buyer? Are you worried about market impact?" Eleanor raised one hand, smiling slightly. "We'll answer all of that in time, but today isn't about them. It's about us." And with that, she stepped back from the microphone. Sarah joined her offstage. "You just lit the internet on fire." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "In a good way?" "Oh, in a very good way." They walked out together through a side door towards the waiting car. As they drove away, Eleanor looked down. At her phone, notifications, hundreds, then thousands. One stood out, a message from a young founder she didn't know. "Thank you for showing us how to walk away with our heads high." Eleanor stared at it for a long time. But the real impact was still to come, and Eleanor had just irrevocably changed the way business leaders like her would be perceived. The next 48 hours were a whirlwind of chaos, not for Eleanor, but for the Sterlings. Headlines spread like wildfire. Black woman CEO walks away from multi-million-dollar deal over values. Quantum Leap founder refuses to decorate the table, withdraws from Sterling merger. Eleanor Vance draws the line, and the public is cheering. Every major business outlet ran the story. Clips of her press conference were ubiquitous. TikTok, 10, formerly Twitter, morning talk shows, even late-night monologues. The internet did what it does best. They unearthed old interviews of Arthur Sterling talking over female executives. They found Liam's questionable college tweets. They dug up Vivian's speech about preserving legacy at a closed-door charity gala. One board member quietly resigned. A few sponsors withdrew from the Sterling Group's quarterly fundraiser. Their PR team frantically attempted to portray the incident as a misunderstanding, but it didn't stick. Because Eleanor hadn't thrown a tantrum, she hadn't stormed out. She had spoken the truth calmly, clearly, and the world had listened. At Quantum Leap headquarters in Palo Alto, the atmosphere was electric. Employees wore her words like armor. Someone printed T-shirts that read, "We build, we don't beg." Eleanor didn't officially approve them, but she smiled when she saw them. Investors called, not to reprimand, but to offer support. "I underestimated what this would do for your brand," one of them admitted on a call. "But you've got loyalty money can't buy." Other partners, smaller, values-aligned ones, reached out. Venture firms led by women, BIPOC-owned equity groups. Even international science coalitions seeking innovation without ego. Sarah walked into Eleanor's office a week later with a folder. "We got 5 new offers. One of them is from the Dyson Institute. They want to co-develop your defense model into a commercial safety net for urban hospitals." Eleanor didn't even look up. "You believe it?" Sarah grinned. "They said they'd work under our structure." Now Eleanor looked up. "Well," she said, "that's different." Later that night, she sat alone in her office, lights low, the city glowing. Behind her, her phone buzzed again. Another message. "You didn't just protect your company. You gave us permission to do the same." Eleanor read it twice, then put the phone down. Her mind drifted back to that long mahogany table, the one where she had been seated halfway down like a guest, not a peer. They had wanted her genius, just not her voice. But what they didn't understand was her voice was the genius. She didn't need their table. She was the table. And the world had just learned, if you can't see the value in someone's presence, you'll feel the power in their absence. Never trade your values for validation. Never let power silence your purpose. You don't have to shrink to fit into a room, especially if you've already outgrown it. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their worth. Speak up when you're overlooked. And if you've ever been told to be grateful just to be in the room, remember you can always build your own.